Well, hi, I'm Laura and welcome to the channel. If this is your first time here, we're super excited to have you. And if you're returning, it's great to see you. And I look forward to hearing your comments on today's topic. So I decided to come out in the community park and take a walk, get my steps in. And how can I ruin such a beautiful evening? Well, let me think. What if we talk about divorce? Oh my gosh, we have talked about so many friendship, relationship situations on this channel. And one I've been dreading is the topic of divorce. But of course, it fits right into what we talk about here, right? Relationships that fail, friendships that go wrong. How do we maintain friendships? How do we give ourselves grace to change when we've gone through very traumatic periods in our life? And I think for any of you who have been divorced, divorce is one of the most traumatic, dramatic, upsetting, world topsy-turvy upside down, right? So I got divorced 20 years ago. And I'm remarried. I've been remarried for quite a long time. Maybe 21 years ago, I got divorced. 3 children, was a military wife, moved all over the country. And when we transitioned out of the military, we lost the camaraderie. We lost all our friends. My husband, I think, lost his purpose because he had built-in colleagues. They ran hard. They worked hard. They partied hard. We were a lot younger. Priorities were in different places. There was a lot of structure to being in the service. And then one day, everything changed. We didn't have that built-in family. And it felt like a family. Any of you who've been in the military and have been stationed in places, sometimes all over the world, sometimes places very, very far from your family. Our family was on the East Coast. We spent a lot of our service time on the West Coast and in Alaska. Greatest place I've ever lived. So his friends in the squadron, their wives became our family. And when he took retirement and we came to Texas to work in my parents' business, not only did time seem to stand still, but boy, we lost so much. We left the state where we had lived for ages. All the friends, as I said, our normal patterns. I gave up my corporate career. That was when I left the hotel industry permanently. Came here, joined my father's business. My husband no longer had that outlet. And we talk about it here on the channel all the time. Whenever there's an imbalance, when things go along, you know what to expect, you're settled in, it's your normal. Things can go on and go on and go on forever like that, right? But when somebody throws a wrench into the works, when something changes, when you no longer have your normal and you're no longer in those jobs that kind of help define you. And what we found out real quickly is that once the relationship started to throw itself off balance, we couldn't keep up with each other. We weren't quite sure who we were anymore because in our case, the military had defined us. So for many of you, you were like me. Your career defined you. Your husband's career defined you. Maybe you moved because of corporate transfers or business opportunities. Maybe you put your heart and soul into a family business. Maybe you were climbing the corporate ladder. Whatever your normal was, when it can no longer be counted on anymore, it often throws a lot of families into divorce. So the end of a marriage is really the ultimate friendship breakup. Often you lose all of your friends, or certainly all the couples, when you divorce. Unfortunately, sometimes friends side with one or the other. Sometimes you're kind of pushed out because, you're the single one now and nobody wants to be around the single woman. That's a real woman thing. The other thing that can change is you find yourself having to move. Maybe you have to sell your house. Maybe you move to another town, and you wouldn't think it would be that big of a deal, right? Why would you lose your friends over that? Seems like 10 or 15 miles can change a whole lot of relationships. But no one looks at you like you're the same person anymore, and that's the biggest problem. People judge, and with that, you sense that they're uncomfortable being around you because you're the single woman now, right? Everything changes. And we find ourselves often in a new place, feeling alone, going through the emotional struggle, a traumatic, dramatic, topsy-turvy time. And the people we thought would be there for us, the people who we thought really knew us and really cared about us, the people we had been there for, they disappear 9 times out of 10. They really do. And I think in large part, it's because they don't want to be around anything uncomfortable. Again, they presume that you've changed, that you won't be able to live the same life that you lived before. And maybe you won't be able to. But honestly, doesn't that tell you that a lot of the friendship was based on money and what you had and what you were able to do? When I got divorced, a lot changed. And there were people in my life who chose not to be in my life anymore. And I think that's pretty standard. You're very lucky if you still have women in your life who you consider a close friend, who stood by you during a divorce. The biggest lesson that I learned was don't trauma dump on other people. Your friends do not need to hear all the gory details. Keep it quiet as long as you can. Keep it private as long as you can. Sometimes we're for, people know, right? We live in the same community. We know the same people. But if you can keep it to yourself as long as possible, if you can find counsel, professional help, don't use your friends as a sounding board, because when we go through tremendously difficult times, we tend to overshare. We're not in our right mind, right? We're not in our right space. We're scared. We're emotional. We're perplexed. We're frustrated. We might be angry, very angry. And we all know that when we get that way, we can say things that we really didn't mean to say. We can overshare. And we give our friends a reason to pull back because they don't want to know. It's uncomfortable. I probably wasn't a good friend to anyone for a couple of years after my divorce. I didn't want to be a good friend to anyone. I wanted to be a good friend to myself. I wanted to worry about myself. I wanted to worry about my kids. Wanted to get my feet back on the ground. I was 40, in my 40s, young 40s. I felt like there was so much ahead. but I didn't know how to get myself there. But I didn't want to use my friends as my sounding board. Friendship is a word that's so overused, and with it come unrealistic expectations. If you're lucky enough to have had a friend since childhood and gosh, they've been with you through everything, you may have a different situation. But for most of us, friendships are formed, over a couple of years. Maybe we're lucky enough to have another woman in our life for 7, 8, 9, 10 years. And even those friendships struggle when you go through a divorce. I don't care what you tell yourself. For a year after your divorce is final, you are not yourself. Many women decide to get out and really live life because they felt claustrophobic in their divorce, or maybe they never had the time or the inclination to try new things and do new things. It might be traveling. It might be going back to school. So many opportunities that you never really thought of before because you had to be home at night because you had a person in your life that expected you to be there, right? So now you're a new you. Do not fool yourself. Do not fool yourself into thinking that you're you, just a better version of you. Give yourself that year to get through all the emotions, to go through all the holidays, and give your friends a chance to slowly get used to the new you. And I find it really didn't happen to me, but I've talked to a lot of women who've gone through divorce who found themselves with a whole new group of friends. They had more time, whether it was time to be social, time to grab coffee, time to go to lunch, maybe even have a drink after work. Whatever the case, they made different decisions because their life had been thrown up in the air. And as the pieces come back down, honestly, you're never sure where they're going to land. I would tell you that for me, divorce was defining. I met my ex-husband when I was in college. We dated the last 2 years of college, got married about 4 years after college, had 3 children. When that marriage ended, so much ended at the same time. My compass was wacko. And I think we forget as women that whether we wanted to be divorced or not, it will affect our relationships with our parents. Maybe we were close to our in-laws. I was very close to my in-laws, and that didn't work out, I think we tried to be cordial, get through a couple of Christmases with cards and presents, and you know what? It's healthy to move on, to move away, to cut the ties you can cut, and to forge a new way for yourself. Divorce and friendship don't necessarily go together. So like I said, if you can, get someone to talk to or find a group that you can be part of, a group that is there to talk about going through the same thing you're going through. Don't expect your friends to be all in on listening to you cry, listening to you yell, listening to you be totally distraught. I'll share with this as I close. I had a neighbor many, many years ago who was going through a divorce. It was a bad situation. I didn't really know her that well, but I saw her crying on her front doorstep one night. And so I walked across to see how she was doing. And she started crying and she shared with me what was happening. And it was just, she was tormented. It was a horrible situation. Well, she went on to get divorced. She stayed in her house for several months. And one day I noticed the ex-husband was back. They patched things up. decided to give it another try. Good for them. She never talked to me again. See, she had shared too much with me, and she was embarrassed to be around me. I don't think we ever talked again. It's a good lesson. We weren't close friends, but I like to think that I was neighborly and I was there for her when she needed me. I certainly didn't push myself on her. But it's always very interesting how our perspective of what we're doing, how we're helping, isn't the same as the person who we think we're helping, the person who we think is asking for support. So keep that in mind. Like I said, divorce is probably the biggest friendship breakup you can think about. It's hard to get through, and it redefines your life moving forward. Well, thanks for stopping by the channel. I look forward to seeing you next week. Take care. Bye-bye.